Hi, I'm Kelda Yoon. Dwight is on assignment. We're hearing more today from Umar Zamir, one day after a jury found him not guilty of all charges in the death of Toronto police officer Jeffrey Northrup. Zamir spoke publicly for the first time yesterday in a brief statement outside the courthouse. Tonight, Zamir and his wife, who was 8 months pregnant on the night Constable Northrup died, sit down for an interview with the CBC's Ellen Morrow.
Just tell me how you're feeling the day after that verdict.
I felt so relieved. This is the first time I went home, hugged my kids without any burden on my shoulders, without thinking what will happen, what could happen, what should happen. But at the same time, I was thinking about the family of Officer Northrup, his kids, his wife. It's a tragedy. It's sad. We are trying to move on. I don't think if we can.
And for you, what did it feel like after this verdict and that moment to see your husband be able to hug your kids without feeling that burden?
Honestly, I can never express it in words. So thankful. I couldn't imagine we would be able to see this day. But like Umar says, we can never stop thinking about them. The late officer's family, we can't. Yeah, we're relieved, but we can't stop thinking about them too.
When the judge said to you yesterday, "You have my deepest apologies for what you've been through," which is a pretty extraordinary thing for a judge to say, what did that feel like for you?
When I heard that, I've seen the both aspects of evil and good here in the past 3 years. The length of evil was long, but I think the strength of good was more. And when I heard those words from Honorable Justice Molloy, it motivated me to forget about those 3 years of evilness and just think about the goodness of the strength of this day.
You described your legal team as angels.
Yeah, that's why, and they are the angels. I know when it happened, I thought no one could save us what's happening here, what everyone is saying. I remember she told me that because we were all alone here in Canada at the start, and when she told our family back home, specifically my sister, that what will we do? We don't know anyone here, and she's the one who stood up, who found Mr. Nadir, who became my surety. She chose me over her family. She came to Canada with her 3 kids. She moved here. Her husband didn't see the 3 kids for 3 years because she chose me, because we didn't have anyone else other than. We found Mr. Nadir later when she found her.
How have you spoken to your kids? I know they're little, and two of them are very little, but your oldest, perhaps, how have you spoken to them about what's been going on these past few years?
I remember when the trial started and they had to be at the court from morning till evening, and Alian and they would ask, like, where is everyone? And we told them that Baba has a project and let's pray for his project. And every day we would sit together and pray. So yesterday he came home and said that Baba's project is over now, and we won. And the first thing he said, okay, so you can take me out now? Because he always had to go out without him. That was really difficult.
I just wonder, when you talk about moving on, what does that look like for your family? Is it just trying to not think too much about what happened, as impossible as that might be, but what are the next steps for you?
I don't think I can move on from the incident itself, but I want to move on from this past 3 years. I at least want to try. And as I said, how the verdict came in and how the judge told me I'm free to go, that gave me hope, high hopes, to forget about the past 3 years we have been through.
From the mayor to legal experts, reaction to Umar Zamir's acquittal continues to come in tonight. Chris Glover is following that part of the story.
Now that Umar Zamir has been acquitted of first-degree murder in relation to the killing of a Toronto police officer, criticism is swirling around whether the case should even have made it that far.
No expert, whether Crown, defense, whomever, could support the Crown's theory that Constable Northrop was standing in front of the car with his hands out and was hit direct on. No one could substantiate that. So I think the Crown failed to reevaluate the case when they ought to have, and I think they did that because there was public pressure, again, because of the nature of this case.
During the trial, 3 Toronto police officers testified that back on July 2nd, 2021, Constable Jeffrey Northrop was standing in the laneway with his hands up when Zamir ran him over with his car. But 2 crash reconstruction experts testified Northrop was knocked down when Zamir reversed out of the parking spot and was already on the ground when he was run over. Video presented at trial supported that version of events, too.
It's important that we establish trust, and it's as I said, in terms of policing or the operations of police.
Mayor Olivia Chow today saying she supports the Chief of Police and Police Service Board to determine whether any officer needs disciplinary action over what they testified.
The Chief and the Police Service has very set policy in place, dealing with officers, dealing with people that may or may not have violated any number of policies. I trust that process. It's really, at the end of the day, up to the chief to manage the police services.
I share the feelings of our members who are hoping for a different outcome.
Sunday's reaction from Toronto's Chief of Police is also catching criticism.
It is somewhat frustrating and embarrassing that we have a chief of police who cannot accept this reality.
Not just from Zamir's lawyer on CBC Radio.
It sends a message to the public that our judges, our juries can't be trusted.
And the president of the Criminal Lawyers Association also thinks the previous chief failed the public.
Don't say things that aren't balanced, that potentially sway public opinion.
We believe this was an intentional and deliberate act.
When it happened, Chief James Raymer condemned Zamir's actions, but did not provide other details, like the fact that Zamir was with his wife and toddler that night, saying other details should wait for trial.
It would be nice if the public was made aware of all the circumstances, but the justice is also concerned about making sure that there's a fair and impartial trial.
Zamir's lawyer told CBC Radio's Metro Morning the former chief deliberately bent the public's perception.
The police knew at that time what had actually happened, and they chose to ignore the truth at a time when the police had a monopoly on the public narrative. And at that time, we were receiving hate mail, even death threats for having the audacity to take on this case. And I don't blame those folks, the ignorant folks who sent us those messages. I don't blame them, because that hatred had been stoked by elected officials and by the chief of police himself.
In September of 2021, when Zamir was released on bail, the premier and Toronto's mayor criticized the release, while Brampton's mayor, where Northrop lived, called it disgusting and disturbing. Today, Patrick Brown issued a statement calling the verdict complex, but wouldn't address his previous comments.
It highlights the inappropriateness of having public officials weigh in on bail decisions when they know very little about the case to begin with. And it's part of the same point that I'm making earlier. It creates a great deal of disrespect for the system of justice.
In our sit-down interview with Zamir and his wife today, we asked if he wants any apologies or reviews from politicians or police.
We want to move on from what happened.
We just want them to believe our truth. That's all. to believe what actually happened.
No apology needed, but a hope that the truth will finally take hold. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
We're getting fresh reaction late tonight from the police chief. He's now calling for the OPP to conduct an independent review into the procedures for officers in plain clothes, saying his statement is as a result of yesterday's ruling. His statement reads, whenever the Toronto Police Service becomes aware of concerns raised by the judiciary, its governance requires that a review be conducted with respect to officer testimony, conduct, procedures, practices, and training. Adding, officers know that trust must be earned every single day with everything they do. Without trust, policing becomes infinitely more difficult. Now, at Queen's Park, opposition parties responded to the fact that the Premier commented on social media about this case back in 2021 after Zamir was granted bail. Doug Ford initially posted that it's reprehensible that the person responsible for this heinous crime is now out on bail, later deleting that, changing it to the person charged instead of responsible. And he wasn't the only politician who spoke out prematurely.
We keep our politicians and our judges and our court system separate. We do that for a reason. For the Premier, and I think John Tory to comment on that, a specific case was wrong, totally wrong. Premier should apologize.
I hope that if the Premier takes any lesson from this, it's that it's best not to try to politicize a case that's underway.
We reached out to the province. The Premier's office did not respond to our request for comment. Late this afternoon, the Attorney General's office released a statement saying prosecution decisions made by the Crown are made without political input. Now, for more on the case, including what the jury didn't get to hear, you can head to our website. All right, shifting gears now, the Leafs are hoping to bounce back tonight after a dismal performance in their Game 1 loss to Boston on Saturday night. Greg Ross joins us from Maple Leaf Square with hundreds of screaming Leafs fans, all hoping for a different outcome tonight. Greg, how are the nerves there?
Well, let me tell you something, Kelda. This is either an incredibly loyal fan base or they are just gluttons for punishment, because these fans show up here at playoff time in this square year after year, and they're full of excitement, and they often leave disappointed. In fact, they almost always leave disappointment. We saw that again on Saturday night when the Leafs were just dominated in Game 1 of this 7-game series against the Boston Bruins, losing 5-1. Yet the confidence here still remains strong. You guys aren't worried about that horrible loss on Saturday night?
No, not at all. I mean, it's a different game, and I'm always confident in my Leafs. Leafs in 6, always.
So he's saying the Leafs in 6. Do you think, and I know I've asked you guys this before, but do you think this is a year that the Leafs could go all the way?
Yeah, I think there's always a chance. I think if Sammy could stand on his head, I think if the goalies could go on a run, we could really do this.
These fans remain confident. It doesn't matter how much disappointment. How are you feeling right now? I mean, you have to be a little nervous facing Boston again and watching Boston just decimate the Leafs on Saturday night.
Feeling a bit nervous, but I think we're going to get all the way this year. This is our year. We'll come back, we'll beat Boston, and we'll go all the way this year.
Just answer the question for me. Are you guys just incredibly loyal fans, or are you gluttons for punishment?
Loyal, always loyal. Always loyal.
This loyal fan base is expecting the Leafs to come back and even this series up. The players skated this morning in Boston after that disappointing loss. William Nylander, one of the stars for the Leafs, did not play in Game 1 despite the fact that he played all 82 regular season games. He skated with the team today. He is still questionable for Game 2 tonight. Here is what the players had to say about tonight's Game 2.
Game 1's over with, so Game 2 is tonight, as far as I know, and we're ready to go.
I expect our team to come out and play hard, play well, play in lots of ways like we did the other night. Just make a few less mistakes.
Well, we just got to stay with our game. A lot of elements that we like, and we got to continue to amplify as well. But correct some things and continue to be really disciplined.
So it's Game 2 tonight from Boston. The Leafs looking to even this series up at 1 game apiece before coming back here to Scotiabank Arena for Game 3, which will go on Wednesday. And if the Leafs can win tonight and even up the series, they will steal home ice advantage, and that would be great news for these fans who will be here watching this game tonight, Kelda.
All right, go Leafs. Thanks so much, Greg. That's our Greg Ross live for us tonight. It's being dubbed the largest deal in Canadian history. Honda is expected to announce a multi-billion-dollar agreement this week to build electric vehicles in Ontario. The deal will be partly subsidized by federal tax credits. Government sources say it will be unveiled in Alliston, where Honda has been making gas-powered vehicles for decades. Olivia Stefanovic has those details.
The small town of Alliston, Ontario, is about to become the leader for electric vehicle production in Canada and possibly all of North America.
This week, we've landed a new deal. It'll be the largest deal in Canadian history. So stay tuned.
That tease after CBC News confirmed a Bloomberg report. Honda is set to announce a multi-billion-dollar agreement, expanding its Canadian manufacturing dramatically, assembling electric vehicles, building batteries, and processing the raw materials to power them.
We have the critical minerals, renewable energy, access to market. So we're becoming kind of the place of choice in the world for manufacturing to look at producing to serve the North American market.
This industry executive says that makes Canada well positioned to serve the lucrative U.S. market.
Canada, especially Ontario and Quebec, are very well placed where you can extract the minerals, turn them into massive batteries that weigh hundreds of pounds, put them in cars and send them down.
Though the deal is several years in the making, last week's federal budget offered a sweetener, an EV supply chain investment tax credit intended to woo the Japanese automaker.
I have every confidence we're going to see the magnetic pull of those tax credits bringing more significant investment to our country, in the days and weeks and months to come.
The deal is being hailed as a major win for Canada and Ontario, competing against hundreds of billions of dollars in U.S. subsidies and incentives. More details are expected to be announced later this week. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
Welcome back. Artificial intelligence will play a key role in the upcoming Olympics in Paris. And organizers recently shared their new guidelines for the technology. Sam Sampson explains.
Imagine an instant replay of an Olympic dive looking like this. In the moment metrics of distance, degree, rotation. That's what's coming for Paris 2024. The International Olympic Committee rolled out an artificial intelligence plan for the Games, including judging tools.
AI will, of course, help to provide additional information to judges to score in a more informed way. Now, this all has to be done in a way to protect the integrity of the athletes' results.
Crucial. So important for him to nail this one.
Some athletes believe AI could eliminate judging errors or biases, like Kyle Schufelt. The Canadian won gold in 2004 on the floor and almost won bronze in the vault. But in a controversial decision, a judge gave an opponent who fell a higher score.
If AI would have been used in 2004 in the vault competition, I think I would have won a bronze medal.
Schufelt says AI will add fairness, but there still has to be some heart.
I would be scared if at a competition a bunch of like R2D2s come rolling into the competition and those are your judges. I wouldn't trust that. But when you have a combination of humans and the robotics and the technology, I think that that is like a really nice balance.
Ahead of the upcoming Youth Olympics, the IOC used AI to find new talent, future Olympians. It's a seed of encouragement possibly needed in modern times.
With social media now and the way kids operate, if they don't have some sort of instant knowledge, they move on really quickly. If AI helps them to acknowledge that their talent does exist, I think it's hugely beneficial.
While the IOC highlighted the potential benefits of AI, they were clear.
He's got the gold medal!
Artificial intelligence isn't meant to replace athletes.
Gold for Canada!
The humanity of the Games will remain untouched.
And she can't see it, now she can!
Sam Sampson, CBC News, Regina.
And you are looking at a live shot of Toronto, a beautiful sunny day in the city. Currently, we are sitting at 13 degrees. Victor Paolo joins us now with a first look at your forecast. And Victor, just a gorgeous day.
How about that day today? A beautiful seasonal day around a high of 12, 13 degrees, but we are expecting a bit of an increase of cloud cover when it comes to our overnight and the start of our Tuesday. Reason being is because we're expecting that precipitation to start right around halfway through the day on Tuesday, and it's going to last all the way through to about your Wednesday morning. Now, talking about winds, we're expecting those winds to change from that beautiful south winds we have right now, which is bringing in that warm air from the Gulf of Mexico, to by the time we start our Thursday morning, there will be a chance of a frost advisory due to the colder temperatures that'll be being brought in from the north. Now, talking about some stats of some average temperatures for today's date, well, 13.2 is your average high, as I did say we were right around that average, and 2.3 is your average low. Now, when it comes to tomorrow morning, and of course, my little Lemmy and your little ones are going to be getting ready for school, what will the temperature be? Well, we're expecting that rain, as it will be threatening. It will be cloudy in some areas. Some areas closer to Markham might be a little bit more wet than areas more west of the GTA. Now, it will be around 9 degrees when the day starts, and we are expecting that 60% chance of rain. But by the time we reach around noon, close to when they're going to be coming home, expect a lot of the regions all across GTA will be receiving that rain that'll be falling. But taking a look at the Golden Horseshoe and what's going to be happening exactly when it comes to the overnight with that cloud cover and when exactly we're expecting that rain to fall, well, we can see that a lot of that rain will be coming, as we talked about, right around the afternoon. And a lot of areas which are more kind of between Toronto and Hamilton, you will notice will not be receiving that much rain, as you can see around supper time. Some areas will be left a little bit dry, but of course some areas such as Barrie and Markham, as you do see here, will be a little bit more wet. Now, when it comes to that wind that we're talking about, we're expecting some stronger wind gusts as we do get into the overnight, but as we do start our morning, things will calm down. But here's what it looks like when looking at a 3-day forecast. We're expecting that rain on Tuesday. We're expecting that rain on Wednesday. And we did talk about the falling of the temperatures, which will result in the chance of a frost warning for your Thursday morning. But stay tuned for the rest of your 3- and 5-day forecast. And over to you, Kelda.
All right, thanks so much, Victor.
It's hard to focus when I'm grabbing my head and thinking about the headaches that are happening all the time.
This teen was poisoned at work. When we come back, an investigation into how the grocery store he worked for got little more than a slap on the wrist. Stay with us. CBC Toronto has learned there's a connection between income and more severe outcomes from residential fires. We partnered with the Investigative Journalism Foundation to analyze the most recent 5 years of Toronto Fire Services data. Sarah McMillan breaks it down for us.
Absolutely terrifying moment.
And a moment Vanjie Lengis will never forget. In September 2021, a fire broke out in a unit 2 floors below her apartment. She was watching TV with her balcony door open.
A huge wave of smoke and soot entered my apartment, so that the apartment with all these lights on and my TV went completely black.
Toronto Fire Services reported at the time that 1 person was killed in the fire. Lengis was also rushed to hospital and suffered long-term lung damage, which still makes walking difficult to this day. Lengis' high-rise building near Bloor and Sherbourne is near the edge of Toronto Centre. That city ward has the lowest median income, and between 2018 and 2022, it also had the most deadly outcomes from residential fires, with 52 deaths and injuries. That's nearly 5 times more than in the highest income ward, Scarborough Rouge Park, which had just 11 injuries and deaths in that time. While there are some outliers, overall the analysis shows lower income neighborhoods have more severe outcomes from fires. It's a finding that doesn't surprise this lawyer and tenant advocate. He points to instances of poor building maintenance and lack of working smoke detectors as factors, potentially putting low-income tenants at greater risk.
There is a pathway to ensure that those rights are preserved, but it's in the face of an affordable housing crisis where they can't find a place to live that's affordable in the city, at least not that's close to their place of work or a place that's suitable for the size of their family. So it's really a no-win situation almost.
This former fire chief from BC has studied the connection between neighborhood characteristics and fire outcomes. He says not enough homes have working smoke detectors, and that's something that needs to be addressed, along with the common causes of fire, including smoking and cooking.
The effective intervention is education coupled with an environmental change. In other words, you need to change something, or somebody needs to show up and have communicate with you, point out what you need to be doing in terms of risk assessment in your home.
He says in Surrey, fire rates dropped about 80% in the years after the city introduced a program to target education in at-risk neighborhoods. Fatalities dropped by about 40%. Just last month, Ontario's Fire Marshal launched a new community fire risk reduction dashboard. It uses census data to map fire risk across the province, using a number of factors, including related to income. Len Garris says he's hopeful that efforts like this will make a difference in improving outcomes in neighborhoods that are most at risk. Sarah McMillan, CBC News, Toronto.
A 15-year-old boy remains in life-threatening condition tonight after he collided with an object while on top of a moving GO train over the weekend. The incident has both police and Metrolinx warning about the dangers of surfing on the GO train. Talia Ricci reports.
Police say 4 teenagers got on the train heading east from Union Station late Saturday night, and 3 of them climbed on the roof while it was moving. A 15-year-old boy was then struck by a stationary object.
We're trying to figure out the circumstances that led to the youths going up on the roof.
Police say the minors were able to get back inside the train and call 911. Officers responded to the call at the Danforth GO station around 12:30 a.m. on Sunday.
We also want to just emphasize that train surfing is very reckless and dangerous and illegal. It's really not worth that 15 seconds, 30 seconds of fame.
Police are working with Metrolinx on the investigation into the incident.
Just another tragic safety incident involving young people. It was 100% preventable, and something which we've been working to continue to control and mitigate the risk of.
Metrolinx didn't provide us with any specific numbers, but this isn't the first case of people climbing on top of trains. It's something the TTC has dealt with as well. Metrolinx says accessing the roof of a train isn't easy and takes a degree of planning.
We don't make access to the exterior of trains easy, particularly the roofs of trains. We've removed lots of maintenance and inspection equipment that is there for legitimate reasons, just to deter people from using things like handholds and ladders.
Police are asking any witnesses or nearby businesses with surveillance video to contact them. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to a CBC Go Public investigation. A Saskatchewan family is speaking out after their teenage son suffered carbon monoxide poisoning at work. As they tell Rosa Marcatelli, their son could have died, but his employer faced no serious consequences.
This is Will Kratenko in his uniform on the first day of his first part-time job. Just a few months later, the then 14-year-old was poisoned at work after a supervisor told him to clean enclosed areas in the meat department of this grocery store with a gas-powered pressure washer.
I started feeling lightheaded and dizzy.
Will staggered to the front of the store and collapsed. He was rushed to hospital with severe carbon monoxide poisoning.
He was basically at death's door.
Another teen got sick just the day before, the same way, according to text messages between that employee and a supervisor. According to the workplace safety report, both teens were not supervised and had not received safety training on how to use the gas pressure washer.
If he would have passed out in that meat department alone with the pressure washer on, he could have been dead right there.
Despite all of that, there was no penalty for the employer. The family couldn't believe it. The problem? A lot of provinces can't issue hefty fines directly to companies who put workers in harm's way. Instead, they can issue orders to fix violations, or they can try to pursue hefty fines in court, which is expensive and time-consuming.
We need other tools. So for serious incidents like this, where for whatever reason there isn't going to be a prosecution, that there can be a significant financial penalty.
The grocery store tells GoPublic the gas pressure washer, similar to this one, was unauthorized, brought in by an employee who no longer works there, saying it will ensure an incident like this never happens again. Will says he hasn't been the same since he was poisoned at work.
I have headaches. It's hard to focus when I'm grabbing my head and like thinking about the headaches that are happening all the time.
Carbon monoxide poisoning can lead to long-term health problems.
It's the unknown, right? It's really the unknown.
What's your essay on?
The family says they want to advocate for more severe consequences. But for now, they're focusing on Will's health. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
As we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX rose 65 points. The Dow climbed 254 points. The dollar traded up at 72.91 cents US. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Going back to our top story, reaction is pouring in today to the not guilty verdict in the trial of Umar Zamir. He was charged in the death of Toronto police officer Jeffrey Northrup. Metro Morning host David Commons spoke with Zamir's lawyer Nader Hassan about what it was like in the courtroom when the verdict was read on Sunday and his thoughts on how officials handled the case.
Take us inside the court. When that verdict was read, what was the reaction?
Well, there was a lot of tension building up to that verdict. Everyone was on the edge of their seat. You could hear a pin drop in there. And then when the verdict was read out, it was just an avalanche of emotion. You could hear my client sobbing. I mean, I had tears welling up in my eyes, as did my co-counsel, Alexandra Hine. We could hear Mr. Zamir's family sobbing behind us. They've been living with this for the last 3 years. This has been something that's occupied their lives, and it was just a tidal wave of relief at that point.
How do they move on with their life, living in this city with the weight of all of this?
That's a challenge that they're going to face. I mean, they're good people, and Mr. Zamir, he's got a good support system, a wonderful family to support him. But I also know that he continues to feel awful. He always has throughout this process. Awful for Officer Northrup and the family of Officer Northrup. Umar has never wallowed in his own self-pity for having to deal with this. Always number one, the first thing he mentioned to me when I met him in that detention center nearly 3 years ago, it wasn't how can you get me out of here? It was, how's that man's poor family doing? Are they okay? That was the first question he asked of me, and I know he's going to live with that weight on his shoulders for the rest of his life.
There are so many things from a law perspective that we could spend hours and hours and hours discussing, and all of it would be fascinating. But there are some different approaches that you took here, including a very rare instance of giving your opening immediately after the Crown's opening, which is unusual. Why did you take that approach?
Yeah, you're right to point out that it's unusual. It's also considered a risky approach. The defense in a criminal case, because the burden's not on them, they don't have to say anything. And so the defense, for strategic reasons, is allowed to wait and hear the prosecution's full case before even deciding whether to call any evidence of their own, or rather just try to undermine the prosecution's case through cross-examination and then close to the jury and make a pitch to the jury as to why the Crown hasn't proven its case beyond a reasonable doubt. In this case was unusual, though. It was unusual because we knew the story. We knew the truth, and we knew that was not going to change. No matter what evidence the prosecution presented, we knew what the truth was, and we knew what evidence that Mr. Zamir would give and what evidence Ms. Sheikh would give, because it's the same story they told police that very night when Mr. Zamir was arrested. So our narrative was not going to change no matter what the prosecution did, and so we thought it was important for the jurors, for the judge, and for Canadians to hear the truthful narrative sooner rather than later.
From the very beginning hours and the weeks that followed, there was a very different narrative that was being presented publicly. Cop killer, in short. And in some instances, it was coming from very high political office. The Premier, Doug Ford, saying that this was, the release of your client on bail was an example of the system prioritizing criminals, in his words, over victims. The police chief at that time, James Raymer, said that this was an intentional, deliberate act. The mayor of Brampton, where Constable Northrop lived, Patrick Brown, said the decision to release him was wrong. In the aftermath of this verdict, how do you contextualize those comments?
You can't contextualize them other than to say many of those comments were completely ignorant comments. They were reckless, they were irresponsible, and they came from people who should know better. The presumption of innocence is one of the pillars of our criminal justice system. And for politicians to spout off and sentence a man and condemn a man who's presumed innocent without knowing any of the true details of the case, it is reckless, it is irresponsible. Canadians deserve and expect more from their elected officials. I'd like to believe, I'd hope, that these politicians did not know the true facts of the case when they spouted off. Doesn't make their behavior that much better, but I'd like to give them that much benefit of doubt. The police chief, arguably, he should have known. If he didn't know, he should have known what the true facts were at that point when he held a press conference saying this was a deliberate and intentional act, because the police knew at that time what had actually happened. And they chose to ignore the truth at a time when the police had a monopoly on the public narrative. And at that time, we were receiving hate mail, even death threats, for having the audacity to take on this case. And I don't blame those folks, the ignorant folks who sent us those messages. I don't blame them, because that hatred had been stoked by elected officials and by the chief of police himself. Now, the good news story is that over the past 2 months, we've been inundated with messages of support from people across the country saying, we offer our support, we want to help, please tell us if there's a legal defense fund, we want to contribute to it. And the difference between then and now is that Canadians know the truth.
Let's talk about now, because in the aftermath of this not guilty verdict, there were a number of people who spoke outside the courthouse yesterday. You were one of them. Your client, Umar Zamir, was one of them. So was the police chief, Myron Demkew, who said that he and many officers on the Toronto Police Service had hoped for a different outcome. How do you hear those comments?
The chief of police is speaking to a particular constituency. I'd like to believe that there are many honorable police officers out there, and I'd like to believe that there are many honorable police officers who believe that the best way to honor a fallen comrade, a fallen colleague, is to tell the truth and not obfuscate or lie in order to toe that line. And indeed, there were honorable police officers who even gave testimony during the course of this trial.
The collision reconstructionist, for instance.
He's a good example of an honorable police officer.
Who said that the account of what the 3 plainclothes police officers in the garage said happened that day, by his evidence, could not have happened. But I want to pick up about what you said about the police chief's comments, that he was speaking yesterday to a particular constituency. I'm going to interpret that as police officers who are on the force right now, on his force, that he is the leader of. But he's also the police chief for this city.
That's right.
What does it do for the image of the Toronto police when the police chief comes up and says, essentially, I disagree with this not guilty finding?
We have a situation here where there was a lengthy trial. The evidence came out. Commentators are nearly unanimous in terms of what the appropriate outcome is. It was a jury of 12 Canadians who come from different walks of life. They heard the evidence, they deliberated carefully, and they determined that Mr. Zamir was not guilty because he's not guilty. It is somewhat frustrating and embarrassing that we have a chief of police who cannot accept this reality.
Constable Northrop's widow spoke outside the court yesterday and used a word which is a very interesting one, that she came looking for accountability. And when you lose a loved one, particularly in such sudden, tragic circumstances, he was run over, and that was never in doubt. And Umar Zamir, your client, was the one who ran him over, and that was never in doubt. But that word accountability, what can accountability look like if not a guilty verdict?
Yeah, let me just start off by saying that I have tremendous sympathy for Mrs. Northrup, and I feel horrible for what she's been through, and I sympathize with her to no end, as does my client and his family. I can't imagine right now what's going through her mind. All I can say is this: I also feel bad for her, because I think she's been told a particular narrative for the last 3 years by those within the police service and perhaps the police association who are supposed to be looking out for her interests. And she's been told a particular narrative that is not true. And she's been forced to sit through the last 3 years with an impression that something happened that just didn't happen. And so she is very much a victim in all of this, and I feel horribly for her, but it would not have done anyone any good to send an innocent person to jail.
I want to speak about the context under which you see this in. You have come to some prominence as a result of this trial, but many within the legal community will already have known you. You were named one of the top 25 most influential lawyers in the country. You've been involved in a number of very high-profile cases. You began your career in New York in corporate law. You were doing pro bono work there, and you've come here and been involved in some very high-profile cases. All to say, you've had a career. Where does this fit in it? What have you learned?
Well, let me just say one thing. I appreciate that you're giving me some props here on the radio, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the words of support from people across the country. But I want to make one thing clear. Mr. Zamir was found not guilty, not because of some fancy lawyering. I mean, we were there, we did our job, myself and my brilliant colleague, Alexandra Hine. We were there, we did our jobs. But he was found not guilty because he's not guilty, not because of any tricks or fancy lawyering his lawyers did. But in terms of where this ranks up there as one of the most fulfilling and important cases I've done. But I have many clients whose names will never be in the news, and their cases are just as important to them as this case was to Mr. Zamir. And as the defense counsel, you need to be mindful of that each and every time you step into that courtroom.
Nader Hassan, thank you very much for your time today.
You are looking at a live shot of Maple Leaf Square. We are less than 5 minutes away from the start of Game 2 in Boston between the Leafs and Bruins. Fans, of course, hoping for a different outcome than Game 1 when the Bruins decimated the Leafs, winning 5-1. Puck drops tonight at 7. All right, let's go back to Victor now with a last check on your forecast. And Victor, it's going to be getting colder.
Taking a look at the map of North America here, just a couple of things to note. You will notice that later on in the week, we'll be experiencing a lot colder temperatures than we've been experiencing over the last couple of days. Almost a return to winter, will feel like. Now, taking a look at the temperature trends over the next couple of days, we can see that Arctic air mass is moving itself a little bit over to the east and unfortunately a little further south to where we're located. Now, here's what your Thursday looks like, and unfortunately, it looks like a lot of that Arctic air mass is working its way right back where it belongs up north, and we're going to be left with more above seasonal temperatures by the time it comes to the weekend. But speaking of temperatures, by the time it comes for tomorrow, the overnight and the start of our day, we're expecting it to be around 7 degrees, close to 9, and there is going to be a chance of rain that we're expecting later on into your day for Tuesday. And taking a skip to look over at that precipitation outlook, well, we'll take a step over to the side here. We're going to watch it all happen. Right as you're expecting that rain to start falling closer to around noon on Tuesday. As you can see right about here, a lot of areas more northwest of where Toronto is will be receiving a lot of that rain earlier than we are. But as you get closer to supper, you'll notice that a lot of the area will be left with that rain. Now, we're expecting some mixed precipitation as you do start your Wednesday because, of course, areas more north of the GTA are, of course, colder than we are. And we're expecting to have ourselves quite the cool start to our day. So you can only expect what areas such as Goddard to be experiencing, or even Barrie, Ontario. Now, as you get later on into the rest of your Wednesday, we're going to be noticing that Wednesday will be another wet day, which will be in store for the majority of the region. And how much rain are we going to be expecting? Well, between now and let's say about Tuesday afternoon, evening, we're expecting around 5 millimeters. And as you get later on into Wednesday, about another 5 millimeters for a total of about 10 to 15 between Tuesday and Wednesday. And a quick look at the rest of our 3 and 5 day forecast. Well, we can see that we have that rain on Tuesday, Wednesday, a bit of return of sunshine on Thursday, a sunny Friday, which we can all look forward to. And unfortunately, that rain will be back in store on Saturday, but hopefully all said and done by Sunday. Hope you all have yourselves a lovely rest of your day. And over to you, Kelda.
All right, thanks so much, Victor. And that's our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. Before we go, we want to leave you with a look at High Park, where the famed cherry blossom trees reach peak bloom today. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, you better hurry. Peak bloom usually lasts only a few days. And a reminder, there will be no news at 11 due to NHL playoffs. Have a great night.